This is the video tutorial for lesson 2.4, which is graphing in standard form. So we've got a little warm-up that's going to cover some of the things from the first three lessons. So you can either try this on the Desmos activity that you've been assigned, or you can just follow along with this video. So x-intercept of 4, there's no scale on here, so I think we can assume these are 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, I can see it certainly doesn't go through 4 on the x-axis. 1, 2, 3. That doesn't look like it goes through 4 either. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, C is definitely a possibility right now. And 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, this one doesn't go through 4 on the x-axis. Let's just check C does have a y-intercept of -3 though. So -1, -2, and -3. So I think we found our answer for that first question. Which graph has intercepts of -2, 0? So I know this is the x value. So I know I'm looking for an x-intercept of -2. So -1, -2. A certainly looks like an answer. B has an x-intercept of +2, so it's not that one. D has an intercept of +2, so it's not that one. And C has an intercept of -2. So I know it's between these two answers. And the y-intercept is 3, 1, 2, 3. So that certainly looks like it is for A. If I look at C, hopefully you can see this is -1, -2, and -3. Which graph has no x-intercept but a y-intercept of -4? So -4 on the y-axis, -3, -4. It's not this one. -1, -2, -3. Same for this one. Not this one either. And -1, -2, -3, -4. It's not that one. -1, -2, -3, -4. So it certainly looks like D. And you can see that as it's parallel to the x-axis, there is no x-intercept for this question. What is the slope of this line? As I see my horizontal line here, I'm thinking about Hoy. And you can see the middle thing isn't actually an O, it's actually a 0. So there's a slope of 0. What is the equation of this line? Well, same sort of thing. If I go back to this equation, I'm looking at Hoy again because it's a horizontal line. So I know it's y equals, and then just look which number it goes through. So -2. So I'm going to pick this one. Notice the ones with 1 letters are either horizontal or vertical. So I can eliminate this answer here. The ones with 2 letters are diagonal lines. So this would actually start from 0 and go down 2 and across 1, because that's what a slope of -2 means. Which graph shows 2x minus 1? Well, I can see they're positive slopes here. So I think it's between B and D already, because these two are going downwards. I know my graph is supposed to start from -1. -1. So it looks like B, because this one doesn't seem to start from -1. It starts from -1 on the x-axis, but I'm not looking for that. And the last part, just to check that it's right, a slope of 2 means we go up 2 squares and then across 1 square. And you can see that does indeed bring you back to the line. A little bit on graphing here, -3/2x + 6. Identify the slope of the line. So that's the number in front of the x. So that'll just be -3/2. The y-intercept, +6. So I'm just going to put 6. And now we can actually plot this then on here. So that means I start from 6. And then the -3/2. The negative only applies to the top number here, not the bottom number. That's why we always go to the right on these questions. If they were both negative, then the two negatives would cancel and be a positive anyway. So when we see -3/2, we need to know just applies to the top number. So -3 means that I count down 3 squares, and then I go right 2 squares. I go down 3 squares, and I go right 2 squares. And if you can do it a few more times, you should certainly try and do that. And then if you want to, you can certainly go ahead and join it up with a straight line. Oops, I didn't quite get my points right, but that should give us a fairly good idea of what we're looking for. Given this function, so it's the same question, use your graph on the last slide. Use the last slide, what is the x-intercept of the graph? So let me just go back and look. So I can see it goes through 4 on the x-axis. So I'm looking for that one there. I need my 4 to be my x value, and I need my 0 to be the y value. And you can put some words in if you choose to for that question. So that's the warm-up finished. And then we'll start getting into what standard form is. So slope intercept form was the one that started with y equals, and then we could use the actual graph to find it out. What if it doesn't start with y equals though? Well, there's 2 different ways we can do this. So we're looking at general for standard form is equations that are of the form ax plus by equals c. So in other words, the x and the y are on the same side. Now, there are a couple of rules for this as well. The x value must always be positive. So we can't have like -2x here. It can only be like 2x. Also, we're not allowed any fractions here either. So we can't have like 1/2 x. It would have to be x or 2x or 3x or -2x, etc., etc. So we can either rewrite it into slope-intercept form and then use what we did in lesson 2.2, or we can use this method of finding x and y intercepts, which is sometimes easier, but doesn't always work for each question. So I personally use a combination of these two methods, depending on how easy the question actually looks. So let's look at method 1 first. So what I'm doing is basically I'm solving the equation, and I want it to say y equals because I should know how to answer those questions. So I'm moving things from to the other side. So I want to move the 2x away from here. This is what step 1 says. I want to move the ax across by either adding or subtracting. And we do it by doing opposites. So as this is a positive 2x, I'm going to do a negative 2x. Now we've got to be careful at this point here. It's very tempting to want to say this is 6x or 6 or something similar to that. But these are not like terms. So we can't actually add or subtract them. 8 minus 2x. It's just 8 minus 2x, that's it. Now, some people prefer to put negative 2x plus 8 here, just to keep the x's first. And you can certainly do that as well if you want to. Now, I don't want 4y, though. I just want y. So it says divide by b, the number in front of the y. So remember what this means when they're next to each other. It means that I'm multiplying. So the opposite of multiplying by 4 is to divide by 4. Now, in theory, I should put the whole thing divided by 4. But it's easier just to say I'm going to divide each term by 4. And then I don't miss any of these answers. So 8 divided by 4 is 2. And if we check negative 2/4, if we're not sure, negative 2/4, hit the little fraction button, you can see that it's negative 1/2. So minus 1/2 x. And then if I was to graph this now, I know the slope is the number without the x, which is a 2. I know the slope is negative 1/2, and I can just do the skills that I did before I'm doing this. And it wasn't actually supposed, this slide wasn't supposed to be here. I think I actually looked at the wrong, I actually did an update for this one, so I apologize, that slide is not supposed to actually be there. 6x minus 2y equals 10, so same thing. If I can make it start with y equals, that would be good. So this time I'm going to subtract 6x from both sides. That will cancel. And don't forget the sign here. It's not 2y equals. It's negative 2y equals. And 10 minus 6x is just 10 minus 6x. They're not like terms, so don't work them out. Then from here, I'm going to divide both sides by negative 2, because that's the opposite of times and by negative 2. And questions where there's a lot of negatives like this, you really want to use your calculator just to make sure we don't do anything silly. So one was 10 divided by negative 2, and the other one was negative 6 divided by negative 2. So 10 divided by negative 2 is negative 5, and negative 6 divided by negative 2 is positive 3. So I have negative 5, and then I have positive 3x. So the y-intercept is negative 5, and the slope, if I was doing it, is 3. And you might want to put 3/1 just to remind yourself you're going up 3, and then you're going right 1 square as you're counting out those squares. And whoops, 5x plus 4y equals 20. So same thing, I'm going to move my x's to the side. Now, it always will tend to be subtract for these questions. Remember, one of the rules for standard form is x must actually be positive. So if it's negative, it's not even in standard form anyway. So most of the time this will be positive, meaning that this first step should actually be negative on these questions. I have positive 4y this time, so I'm just going to leave this as 4y. 20 minus 5x, that's it. 20 minus 5x. Don't have to work anything out because they're not like terms. Divide both sides by 4 and just check for both of these two terms. Now there is a Desmos slide available, but we're just going to do this one in our head, but you can check if you need to. 20 divided by 4 is 5, and negative 5/4 does not simplify, so it would stay like this. So if I was graphing this now, I would start from 5 on the y-axis, my y-intercept, and it would have a slope of negative 5/4, which means I go down 5 squares, and then I go right 4 squares. Now, there is a second method for this as well, where we actually can use x and y intercepts. So there is a little reminder here if you want to check, just to remember what we'd covered in lesson 2.3. So what I actually do is I substitute in a convenient value to find out what the other variable actually is. So when we solved equations in our first unit, we only just had a single variable, normally just x. Here we have two. So what we want to do is want to find those x and y intercepts. So what we found out last time is y intercepts have an x value of 0. So effectively what we're doing is, I'm going to do step 1 now. If I substitute x equals 0 into here, anything times by 0 is just 0. So in other words, this must be equal to this number here. I just get 3y equals 12, and then you can clearly work this out by hand. Which number times by 3 is 12? And hopefully you'd recognize that the answer is 4. So the y, I'm going to put yi just to show it's the y-intercept, is 4. If you're not sure, you can go to a little more trouble and put divide by 3, and 12 divided by 3 is definitely 4, if you weren't sure on that. Now, when I'm doing step 2, I do the reverse. I want to substitute in y equals 0. That leaves me with 2x equals 12, and obviously 2 times 6 would give you 12. And therefore, I found out what my answer is for this question. So this one can be a little quicker sometimes. So I would just go to 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I would go to 4 on my y-axis. Probably didn't leave myself enough room here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I would go to 6 on my x-axis, and then I would literally just join these up, and then you can see the answer straight away. So if the question was like in 2.3, where it says, what is the x-intercept? This is actually a really quick way of finding out what the x-intercept is, or similarly, what is the y-intercept? You can see by just solving one of these two equations exactly what the answer is. If you do want to work out what the slope is, you can work out the slope from here by just looking at the squares. You can see that I go down 4 squares, and I go across 6 squares. And -4/6, I know is -2/3. So I could actually come up with the equation in slope-intercept form in a slightly different way as well. So here's my -2/3 with an x, and my y-intercept was 4. So I could put +4 if it asked for what the equation specifically was. And you could check using that method we looked at earlier. And actually, this would physically let me do this now. So I had a y-intercept of 4. I had an x-intercept of 6, whoops, which is slightly off the graph here. I didn't even need to fix that before I publish this. And then you can join these up the straight line. As this is slightly off the graph, I'm going to have to improvise a little bit there. So the x-intercept, if it asks you for the coordinates, whoops, I just clicked on the wrong thing. There we go. It was 6, so it would be 6, 0. And the y-intercept would be 0, 4. So make sure the y value is 4. And you can see that those are good. So if we do the same thing again, and this time it says by using the intercepts, I'm just going to do them one at a time. So I'm going to set the x value equal to 0. And actually, you can just see this straight away. It just says y equals 6 straight away. So there's actually your y-intercept. Y-intercept is 6. If I then do the reverse and set y equal to 0, I get -6x equals 6, which might not be so easy to solve. So we'll just divide both sides by -6. And then check on your Desmos calculator what 6 divided by -6 is. And it should be -1. And hopefully this time there will be enough room for me to actually plot this. So we had 6, we had -1, and then I can just join them up. So in some ways, this can be a much easier question. It's just sometimes we don't get nice answers for our intercepts. It can be difficult to plot fractions, for example. Right now, these are whole numbers, which makes this much easier to do. So the x-intercept, it went through -1, so that's -1, 0. And y-intercept went through 6, so it will be 0, 6. And you can see that those are good. And for the last one, I didn't actually write out the question this time, because this is kind of what you would have to do going forward. You'd look at the question, then you'd write out the question. So if we just ignore the x, we have -y equals 9. And that's not quite what we want. We don't really want -y. We want +y. So remember, this means -1y. So divide both sides by -1. And 9 divided by -1 is -9. So my y-intercept is -9. Now, if I ignore the x part, if I ignore the y part this time, so I get 3x equals 9. And you might recognize straight away that 3 times 3 is 9, and you'd be correct. I can just, of course, divide both sides by 3 and also find out the answer that way. So the x-intercept for this one is 9 divided by 3, which is 3. And we already did our simplifying in my head, so I'm just going to skip through that. So negative 9 on the y-axis, 3 on the x-axis. And then we can just go ahead and plot just to make sure that they look good. The x-intercept, it was 3, so make sure the x value is 3. The y value was negative 9, so make sure the y value is negative 9. And then we can just check those two answers. And that concludes the video for this one. So in general, they're probably not going to force you to use one method or the other. Sometimes some people prefer one method, sometimes people prefer the other method. I tend to look at the question. If I can easily do it in my head, I would use the second method. If I can't easily do it in my head, so for example, if I had 16 divided by 5, I know 16 is not in 5 times table, I would probably go ahead and just use that first method where I rearrange the equation. But that rearranging the equation method is certainly important because that's where we have to practice our skills from solving equations. And that's something that Desmos can't do when there's 2 variables. So something we do need to make sure we're sure of. I think that does it for this video.